This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Okay, let's call to order the April meeting of the Easthampton Historical Commission. First order of business, public speak. I think that there's no one who's like to speak. Do we have any minutes?
I did not do that.
Okay.
I apologize. Forgot that
I kind of forgot all about it.
I forgot that I said I would do them, and then you prompted that you noticed.
I was wondering if anybody had any notes on that, because I didn't even see that in the minutes. Easy.
We'll try to get that for the next meeting.
Okay, so until the next meeting. Okay, correspondence. We got an email today. Verizon Wireless wants us to actually asked us if we would like to comment. I'm not exactly sure what they're doing. Probably more antenna on the city tower at New City Brewery and 72 Pleasant Street.
I haven't heard anything about this, so.
It's the first I heard of it. It's very vague. I believe there's already some equipment in order.
Yeah. That is plastic shack.
It's actually it looks like an elf.
Yeah.
It's already got.
It's already got. So what do they want to do? Just put a few more on?
Well, right, but the new ones, I mean, the comments could be something like, but the new ones must be the same color as the smokestack to blend in.
Well,
And, you know, because
just read the question.
they're not asking about that, but.
Well, I know. I'm just saying that they really.
What they're doing is they've identified that there's historic resources nearby.
Welcome your comments regarding the effect of the co-location project on historic resources that may be eligible.
So, I mean, the fact is, additional antennas would detract from the historic integrity of the smokestack unless they are designed to be as minimally obtrusive as possible, and the same color as all of the cabling and everything like that is.
And if I recall correctly, when, wasn't it them as well who did the water tower at Ferry Street?
There were a number of them.
And they said, oh yeah, we will, and they didn't.
They never did. They were supposed to repaint the tower.
Did we talk about this one before?
Right, and so like, I think they,
That's been going on since Bob Schroll was on
Anyways, yeah, so.
what they ended up doing is they like put a hat on top of the tower, and then they painted the hat, but they were like, no, we didn't do anything to the.
Can you write down what you were just saying? Just like, read bullet points and that way I can.
They were supposed
Write up
to
something in
paint
30
the
days.
flame rusty.
Right. Exactly. So, it seems like a trend in the wrong direction. They're putting antennas on everything up there.
So,
Yeah. Let's what do you think? Is there any other correspondence? Well, actually, this one. Did you get email on the open media law trainings?
Yeah.
Did you do it?
I have, yeah.
There's only like 2 more sessions. They're done.
Session.
the end of May, it's
You mean you gotta sign up for a specific time? It's not like a.
I got an email today
I'll
that said
check.
you could go on the state website.
Okay, 'cause,
And you have till the end of May.
There's two, like I said, there's two live sessions. That's it. I mean, it's, you know, it's gonna be,
well, interesting,
just my opinion.
yeah,
I mean, there's nothing wrong with the training itself,
right,
but I don't think it's required by the state.
but, and if you're already obligated for that time, it's a specific time.
Now, according to the email I got today, that I saw in my regular email,
Yeah, but he was a link, right?
you could get a link to the state and take it.
There's two sessions. That's it.
Well, I've intended to just do it, so I'll let you know if it doesn't work.
Anyways, I work with Lindsay, you know, it's just necessary that we have to take this class. Because, I mean, before, what the state requires is that they give us this right here. And then you certify that you got it, and you understand, which is that. For some reason, they dispense you with that. I don't know if it's just the experience or whatever.
Training schedule.
I think that's the email I got.
This one. But it's different, yeah, that's weird down here. So, I'll find this.
If for some reason you remember that Kenneth Manager being hot, reach out to their office.
So, just downtown, you know, it's next. Is perfect schedule.
I just want to
Good flavor there to keep up with that.
Yeah, I don't know if that's what he said, so.
No, but I mean, what you're saying is good. I think, you know, with some notes I should be able to get something together. This isn't what I was doing. This is a general reminder that in order to serve on a board or committee, you are required to have the Massachusetts Open Meeting Law training. Did you see this? Do you understand this? Does it make sense to you as opposed to what we used to do?
Yeah, so you used to be required just to, or board members used to be required to sign an acknowledgement that they received the open meeting law information. And subsequently, because of COVID and things going on hybrid and remote and all the rest of that, the Attorney General has said, I guess the Attorney General or it's the city solicitor, someone in the city has said that now all board members need to not just acknowledge.
I was looking through that. It doesn't say anywhere on the state website that we have to do that. So,
I mean,
it's very, you know, it's kind of hard for people if they only do sessions like 9 o'clock in the morning or at noontime or something like that. People at work that, you know, can't really make these 6 hours long.
yeah,
I mean, I did one yesterday, and it was okay. It was about an hour, but it's like,
Not anything you didn't already know.
well, that's kind of part of it. And the other part is that it's not looked over. You know, I mean, I don't know. It hasn't been updated in a while. What they were saying was that all members need to have received these materials and acknowledge that they received them and understand them. So, I don't know. I mean, the only thing they give
So when are we,
you take those.
not required to.
when are we receiving?
Because I'm not on the board.
I understand that. Dealing with them all the time probably wouldn't be a bad idea to know stuff, right?
I mean, I do, and I have signed my receipt of open meeting law training years ago. But
So this is what you get if you take the online course.
So, I mean, I don't know.
I asked for clarification on this, you know, why? It's gonna be tough for some people, they're not gonna be able to do it, especially with 2 sessions left.
My understanding, I mean, so they keep adding sessions, I think they're only publishing 2 sessions at a time.
Well, they have a whole list of book at one point.
Yeah, there is a, we just found the list.
Yeah, I found the list. It looks like I can make the 10th, so I
Yeah,
will.
I mean, if you make them, that's fine,
Yeah.
just like I
But
said, I
What
was.
if someone doesn't have a computer, like
That's the
Tracy?
other thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
I mean, it's, you know, it's,
I don't know what to say. I mean, because this is
I was just wondering if
because it's
you.
coming from the mayor's office
Yeah.
and they've been communicating with chairs directly. I haven't actually been, there's not been a direct communication from the mayor's office to me
Right.
about any of the boards or committees that I work with, saying what this is about. And so I've only heard about it from chairs as they forwarded it to their.
We don't get to
Today,
it
there was, you know, because the email went out yesterday, today, so there's like 3 or 4 people from different boards. They're going, I can't do this.
We can't get to it
It's like,
because.
Right.
From years past, this has always been, we send it out, and then
you should still send out materials.
well, they send it out, and then they follow it once or twice, and there's from my, so.
We had all these statements, we always had to do
So,
every year.
Like I said, I'm just asking, not necessarily here, but, you know, the administration can substitute this even, you know, as opposed to having it go. Here's the materials, the read them. I don't know.
I would say if you can't make the trainings,
There's gotta be an option.
then email Lindsay and let her know that you won't, and that you can't make those trainings, and,
See what happens then?
We just
Yeah, I
failed
mean,
the
that's
committee.
something-
and that's
Right,
what-
there you go.
I mean, I don't think that that's the result is that people are going to be, you know, terminated from committees because they haven't done it. There might be, it might come up maybe on reappointments, I don't know. You know, that's just. Or it might,
Continue to move forward.
or it might just be dropped and then next year will be a similar, you know.
If for some reason any member is unable to attend any of the training offers in the past 90 days, they will need to reach out to our office and determine eligibility to continue with their.
I mean,
Well, let's just get on with our stuff.
Okay, I think that's
Their stuff.
that is it for the correspondence. I did send a letter of support to the Old Town Hall people who their next.
On the preservation.
All right, so let's see. So yeah, that went out today. So, unfortunately, it's not again. All right, then we'll delay bylaw. Yeah.
who's this thing?
Yeah. Sulco Partnership.
Alright, then we're delayed. So, unfortunately, because we're not, virtual right now, I only have one hard copy and I can't share my screen, and I didn't think to print out copies for everyone.
See?
So,
That's fine.
I guess, you know, we can, in March I had sent out a sort of cleaned up copy of everything, of the proposed ordinance, or, based off all the conversations we've had. Would it be helpful, I can quick make a copy of the copy machine and one to John, do you have copy, you're looking at digital copy or do you want a hard copy?
I'm fine with digital. Yeah, digital.
And you're looking at it now?
No, I didn't. I was taking notes.
Okay. Make a couple of copies and
A little recess for 2 minutes. I just, just not to beat a dead horse, but it just irritates me.
I get that. Although I also have learned that I don't like getting my blood pressure up until somebody tells me there's actually a problem. Because sometimes I get the hackles up, I go in, guns blazing, and then they're like, oh, don't worry, we'll just do this or whatever.
Okay, that's the thing. Well, can you show me where's this coming from?
Yeah, it seemed out of nowhere, and it's odd that we got it with only a little bit of time
I
to
think there
pick out
was one or two back, but it's kind of like one of those things. Right.
Well, but I work and don't get to just choose to say to them, like, oh, sure, I'll just take that time off. That's not just.
The thing is, it'd be different if they were in the evening.
Right.
Or if it was something, like, there's no reason why, what, the webinar.
Right.
It could be just recording and watching. I mean,
So,
you won't be able to
training
answer,
is
you won't be able to ask questions, how it could. But, you can, stand by. You're supposed to have a digital copy.
you said, it was only a minute ago, so. Okay, so,
Well, you're not as young as we used to be. The last time we had a meeting in public, I was 2 years younger.
seriously,
does that affect the brain or something?
Brains shot. All right.
I don't think there was much changing on the definitions or the intent and purpose.
Jamie, where is the digital version?
Go back to the March meeting. I should have linked to it. Do you want me to check it?
No.
I wish I could just share my screen.
We could, bring laptops and do tablets and do a Zoom meeting and sit together.
I think we're gonna try to figure that out next time because we have large screens in every room, so
That's up to you. Great.
yeah. So we can actually do this if I can figure out how to project to them.
Yeah, oh, I just use Apple TVs as an easy way to have a wireless. That way you can just go.
Yeah, I think these are all on phones.
Oh.
They're all like Chromecast or whatever.
I like that.
I don't know. I have to. But that's not, unfortunately, not this
No.
weekend.
Yeah.
So.
No problem.
I'm historical, so I enjoy reading it on paper.
Yeah. You did find it? Okay.
Okay, so basically, section 460 is staying the same.
Yeah, so that's the intent and purpose. I don't think there was any change to that. I think I added the definition for preferably preserved significant building.
5.
Yeah. That was not in the original, but it was like in the.
Which one are you?
So yes, that was a new definition, number 5. And then we do number significant building part D is added. So the original one said
We're in definitions first.
so it was added to association, the second sentence, or second line, or association with a famous person, event, architect, or builder, was added. It originally was just architect or builder, that was not associated with a famous person or event. So then, section 418, procedure. This is now where most of the changes have happened, and I'm not gonna, I think we should look at this as if it were its own standalone document, not comparing it back to previous years, because there were a lot of changes that were made, and there are some things that still need to be kind of determined or figured out how we're going to proceed on them. So maybe it makes sense to just read through it out loud, or okay. So then we can kind of like think about it. So upon receipt of an application for demolition, whether in whole or in part, of a building that was built 50 or more years prior to the date of the application for the demolition permit, or is of unknown age, the building inspector shall forward a copy thereof to the commission. No demolition permit shall be issued at that time. So, I guess just comparing it back quickly, that's just expanded. So it's like a little bit more clear as to. They have a note. Building inspector and historical commission shall create a form. And I think the intent was that the form would be able to advise the historical commission, the building commissioner about the nature, like who, some information about the building, so it's not just demolition. Right. But I did not expand that, so I didn't know, what we want that form to say, or, and I don't think we should put in the ordinance what the form says, but I think we should put in the ordinance the intent of the form. So,
Well, you kind of just said it, so that there's some kind of context, and not just.
And if I remember correctly, we were talking about having a form with basically spelling out what they need to, if we do that before the determination or how?
well, so the problem is, so the
And the form is to,
a person creates a permit. The person wants to demolish a building or partially demolish a building, submits a building permit to the building inspector, and the building inspector has 30 days to make a decision. And that is the form that the building inspector typically uses and was to follow the state's guide, the state building permit form. So then, like, the building inspector says, okay, well, this building's over 50 years of age, or it's under age, so here's another form we need to fill this out, which is for asking for determination by the historical commission for,
Right, so that would have some background from the building and all, right? This is what we're talking about.
right.
So we would, yeah.
So maybe it may or may not be helpful at this point because the commission determines like it's not a significant building. Do we really like if it's you know
Right, we don't want to do the work.
the most recent ones we've dealt with would be like the driving like that shed at the driving range.
Right, the ones that don't apply,
Or
so.
the on Cottage Street, that garage
Right.
that like, you know, so like where part of the planning board process, the historical commission was notified that this was gonna happen. They're like, no, those buildings aren't really historically important. And there's something filed now, so when the applicant comes to demolish it, then that.
I guess what I was gonna say, next up though, you got that form, whatever you want to put on there, basic information, right? That it will either, yes, it's significant or no, it's not. With possibly, you think adding the, if found to be significant, the hearing will be scheduled within so many days. You know, outlining that part of it, and at the time of the public hearing, you will need to bring some of these documents. If it doesn't go through, then you don't have to worry about it. If it does, they know what they need to bring in the public hearing. And they know the timeline. That's all kind of what we're trying to do.
So
We
when
would,
would
well, sorry.
I guess I'm trying to I don't really understand if what you're asking is or when the applicant would get this, when the building would get this form, that you just is it like
Well, you could do it initially, and if it's determined not to be significant, well, then you just kind of, okay, don't worry about it. If it is, then this is what you need, these are your next steps. I mean, I can go to everybody, because chances are somebody that's tearing something down might have more than one building in town anyways. But, you know, you would just kind of simplify it. Having, okay, no, you do this.
Right, if I'm following, so because this is this is a form that's an addendum during the application process
for a building?
for construction.
Well they're you know, counterintuitively they are it's a
Anti-building.
yeah, it's a building permit that
It's a demolition permit.
But I
it's
get
like
it, but the point is, it's at the very initial stage. So what we're saying is, first two options are the historical commission is deemed that it is not historically significant. Go ahead and proceed to the next square on the board. Or it has been, the meeting has to be called at that meeting, and then this is where I'm a little confused. So then we would have like our inventory card, right? Yeah, we'd have essentially the sheet of why it's significant, and that gives context of the meeting. That's how I'm understanding it. Does that sound right, or am I
Well, that might not be the only resource we want to look at, especially some of the older ones, it's pretty basic.
right? But we're saying that it has to be filled out. But right now in the ordinance, we're just saying that has to occur and it has to be complete. Which,
right, so I guess what I'm hearing is that there's some uncertainty about the process at the building department. And when we're really interacting with the owner, right? Because, like, that if it's, if we are saying the historical commission found this building to be historically significant, you're gonna have to come in for a demolition delay hearing. And here's what you're needing to provide as part of the process. Or are we saying you might be subject to demolition delay hearing? You need to provide us some basic information, and the historical commission will weigh on the significance of that building and then get back to you. The significant building, and then if
Yeah, but I know, you can go through. So, okay, well,
we can also hold off on trying to figure out what that is. And
yeah, I think
exactly
we need more, but what I'm saying is, if you hand them something like, okay, here's, you need to fill this basic stuff out here, but also be aware, if it's found to be significant, you will need to do X, Y, and Z.
Yes.
And you know what I mean?
I guess what I'm a little bit sensitive to is that we don't have the building inspector here, and I know that depending on who the building inspector is and at what point in, like, different building inspectors have different interpretations of what their role is, and if we are asking them to do the work of the historical commission, they may push back and say, nope, I just have this state form and that's it, and that's the only thing I give out. Or they may say, yeah, no problem, I'm happy to work with the historical commission, what can we do? And we'll bend it backwards. So, like, it may be best that we let the building commissioner's process play out as it is, but then once it comes to the historical commission, that's when you say, okay, well, here's the information that we need in order to go to.
Right. See, that's where I got lost a little bit. It's not really so much in that, but where we are defining, because we're writing an ordinance, right? So that's where I understood we're trying to figure out here is, at what point are we talking about that we're sliding this across the table to the applicant for demolition?
Mm-hmm.
And I agree, we wouldn't want the building inspectors to do the work. In fact, just for clarity, we don't want the applicant to do the work either. We want to determine the historical significance. You don't want to ask the person who's suggesting to demolish the place, how historically significant is it? They're going to say it's not.
Well, or they may say, I mean, some people.
Well, okay, I shouldn't assume. Okay, not assuming ill intent everywhere. But point being, that gives the potential for abuse that I would assume we don't want to offer in the
Right,
first
so we
place.
would not be asking what is this, the historic nature of the building, but we would be saying, who was the architect? Who was the builder? When was it built?
Yeah.
So that's
background
what
that we may not have.
that's what's helpful to me to now to get aligned with where we're at. So that's the part they would have. It doesn't require the
Well,
building
maybe,
inspector.
well, but it requires the building inspector to give them the form, to say,
They have a counter back there now, so.
Well, here's a question. Here's
I mean, all I'm saying is that, like, that different building commissioners have different ideas about what their roles are in the city and how much they are just like an agent of, making sure that things are built properly versus, in line with the state building code versus,
I get it.
That's building, but in the past, having 20 or 30 years on this commission on and off, the building inspector was always aware that whenever a demo permit was asked for, they would immediately ask us.
We worked with one building inspector for quite a while.
We worked with about 3.
and then there was flurry of them, so.
Yeah, and not all of them have always gotten the information that we needed or recognized that a building was historically significant. And that's nothing that we can.
But we're trying to create something
We're trying to create
that,
something where
that
they
solves
know.
that, right? We don't want to encourage, like, we don't want to create a scenario where it's like, okay, and if you don't feel like messing with it, we'll just let historic building go because you don't feel like it's within your purview.
I mean,
That's-
they have to be aware of our requirements as well as what all building requirements are, and they have been in the past.
Right, and I guess what I'm trying to be sensitive to is that there's been a consolidation of like state building code. And my understanding is that now we just use the state forms.
So here's a question. Here's just a real straightforward question. If I'm about to take down a building, is there a chance I don't know who built the building? Is
Sure.
it possible I just don't know the answers to the? So I, as the client, can't necessarily fill in that sheet. Is what you're saying. And if that falls to the building inspector, that may be
No,
problems.
not saying the building inspector's gonna fill it out.
Okay.
I'm just saying like, if you go online and see what the building inspector's forms are, they all have the state seal on them.
Would it be a good idea to meet with the inspector?
I would say it would be a real good idea.
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, that's,
That
because we
seems like
can't,
that.
we can't.
Yeah, here we are guessing now. Why don't we?
Yeah. But in the past, whenever a demo permit was asked for, they immediately would ask us. There wasn't any determination that the building inspector had to figure it out.
Right.
He would just immediately come.
Right. And that wouldn't change.
In my experience, we've had some guys that were not aware, and then when they became aware, they were fine. For the most part, everybody's been fine.
So I think,
Some things kind of slip by because we just don't think about it or don't know. Or it doesn't seem like it's that old, you know.
But the point is, we're trying to create a policy so that we can
Policy,
catch
yeah.
those things and not let things
But yeah,
significant
it's
stuff
talking
by.
to the inspector.
Yeah, but it seems like that's the easy person.
And, you know, as far as, if they use a state form to start the process, we should probably have something there. Okay, it's one of these three, whatever is it in here? See what we can do. Right here.
Person, architect, right?
It's looking over 50, we got 4 things. Plus. So, yeah, you know, it fits any of these 4, which is fairly simple. Okay, yeah, it's 50 years old, okay, there's nothing we need to step in. It may be nothing, but, you know,
so maybe
it's still,
every time there's a new building inspector, the committee, or at least one person in the committee should meet with the new building inspector and tell them what our process is on the
of
historic
course, with
commission.
the COVID, that's prepared to be, we figure out who's in the building anymore.
Sure. But it's just communication. It's the thing that if we don't do, I'm sure we're going to cause a problem for half the problems.
Whenever we have had a problem in the past, we would just get to the new building inspector and say, hey, this is the process.
I've never been notified when there's been a new inspector,
Good point.
you know, so that's, I mean, that's another thing, where it's like, oh, Joe's not here anymore, where'd he go,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I suppose it must be a process.
And work next door.
Yeah.
Well, then you can tell.
Yeah, no.
Sure won't, right?
I mean, I think it's like if I knew, I happen always know what theirs.
Yeah, well, that's the thing,
And
it's,
that's what I'm saying, is like, I don't know these things, and I'm next door to them.
Well, let's talk with the
But as
building
soon-
inspector as well,
yeah.
and then we can ask that question too, and ask them, okay, so if your job turns over, how might we put in place a process that we would know, we would communicate, and
Leave
resolve.
a note on your desk.
Yeah.
As you leave.
We can try inviting the building commissioner to one of these meetings,
Good idea.
but they typically work 7 to 3 and don't like to stay for meetings.
a Zoom meeting during lunch or something.
I think it's,
So it might be that in order to meet with the building commissioner, we need to do something during the day. And maybe, if not all of the commission can make it, then we can get a few members.
But it doesn't have to be the whole commission. I think at one time, when I was on the commission, I went down, we were having an issue, I went down and explained to him what the process was.
Alright, so let's table that form right now. So they're supposed to forward a copy of the application to the commission to within 30 calendar days, the commission or its designee should make an initial determination as to the historic significance of the building. So that's new in that previously it could only be the historic commission itself, not the designee of the historic commission. So you could designate, or you guys could designate, like, okay, for expediency, we designate the planning department, planning director, assistant, whatever, to, or the chair of the commission to make that initial determination. Or the commission could say, no, we don't want to have a designee, we want to make all these decisions at the good options. But the point being that for those buildings that don't rise to the level of being preferably preserved, it expedites the process.
so
It gets
you're
that.
saying that we could say Jeff would be a designee in the planning department.
Or or in this case, let's say, because I work with the historical commission, we would say, okay, well,
Jamie was at the meeting, Jamie, you
Too
go
close
into their
Too
meeting.
close to things.
Right.
Conflict of interest.
Yeah, or that the chair does that.
Right.
You know,
So that
I mean,
the whole group doesn't have to get a quorum
We don't have
together.
to, we don't have to.
we don't have to have a quorum just to say, yeah, this is
fine, right.
this building's listed on this building's in Macris. Like, yep, it's historical. It needs to go through demolition delay. I mean, I think it's pretty clear when it's been inventoried whether or not the building is historically significant. I think it's pretty clear when it's on the National Register or pending National Register information.
Right.
But
Well,
I think the harder one is any building that's over 50 years old, but not inventoried and not in Macris. Like, I wouldn't feel comfortable making that decision.
Well, we would ask you to.
But
that would be something I'd agree with.
the language right now says the commission, the proposed language right now says the commission wants to need to make that determination.
My reading of the language would imply that you could be the designee, but you couldn't designate yourself.
No,
You couldn't take it
I'm
yourself.
assuming right now, like I'm assuming that the commission, after this ordinance is passed, then designates either chair or myself or a member of the committee to be that designee to make that initial determination.
But on a case-by-case basis, right? Not just one local appointment of a designee, but more on a case-by-case basis is how I view it.
I would think it's horrible because until that's revoked, because you don't know, because if every time we get an application, we have to go back to the commission to get a vote to say that yes, you're the designee for this application, might as well just vote on whether or not that's historically significant.
My understanding had just been that if, like, we're in a meeting and you're here, and you're going into a meeting with the person that you were intended to communicate with, we could say, okay, we designate you knowledgeable and up to date and able to transmit that information. But if you weren't here, if you had been the designee in March, but in May you weren't at the meeting, then we need another designee. We'd have somebody else who would go and say, well, Mike was at the meeting, Mike would be the designee, and go and explain.
I mean, that's not the intention
That throws me then, because I'm not sure why would we want like a sole designee. What's the benefit of making that like a title, an entitlement?
because so the process right now is the applicant goes to request a demolition permit. The building inspector says, okay, this looks like it's older than 50 years old, or it looks like it's somehow going to be subject to demolition delay.
Right.
So we send this to the historical commission. The historical commission looks at it and says, "Oh, we just met last night, so we're not going to be able to meet. Our next meeting isn't for another 30 days, and we have to now have a special meeting to meet to decide whether or not this building is historically significant." Not saying that we're having a demolition delay hearing, or not to hold the demolition delay hearing, but just to decide whether or not the building is historically
Just to make
significant.
a determination.
So that way, because otherwise because under the current ordinance and the proposed ordinance, we have 30 days to make that initial determination and respond back to the applicant, the building inspector. Otherwise, they can go ahead and grant the demolition permit because we didn't respond quickly enough. And so that having a designee allows one person to act on behalf of the commission to say, yep, that building's listed in macros,
Right.
it's historically significant, or
Okay.
that building is, it's 53 years old and it's a ranch house with vinyl siding and frames and like no, we don't need to.
So would that mean then, so any member of the committee and the designee, in other words, do we have 6 people that are capable of doing that or 1?
It would be one person who's designated.
But not only the designee can do it, right? The committee can do it too, right? Am I just
The whole committee.
right? But
Well, I mean,
the
right now,
commission-
the proposal says the commission or its designee.
right. So
So-
that's why I'm
So if
wondering,
you-
is it
if
just
you were-
tweaking the
we were to say
language?
like, okay, the chair can act without everybody.
That's what I'm getting at. Is
It has
it
been in the past.
Right,
Yeah,
but,
right,
but,
and-
but sometimes it's not the chair. Sometimes it's
right?
you're not the chair, but
Exactly.
like you could be designated to be that role.
Right, and I'm wondering if it's just a minor tweak in the language that would give us that flexibility to make it more conveniently whichever person is most available and appropriate, but within the bounds of our committee and any
Well-
designated.
I was gonna say like, okay, I mean, just for the sake of making a simple commission or its designee, which in most cases would be the chair, unless the chair is not available. Like, I'm out of the country for,
Yeah.
a month, say something comes up, so
I was gonna
somebody
propose
does somebody
The
else.
commission, its members or designee. That language would mean it's both the commission if the commission meets, the designee alone if they were appointed, or any member of the commission, because we're all
But
capable.
what happens when this goes to it goes to the commission and it becomes now it's any member, and John, you say, yep, it's significant, and Beverly says, no, it's not.
But you could do that as the designee, the same problem exists. You as the designee could say, yeah, and that could say no.
Well, no, because the designee makes the way that it's currently written in the proposal, it's the designee who makes that determination. So
Wait, the designee makes the determination of whether it is or isn't.
that
Because they
initial-
don't have to wait for the commission. That's what I'm
Right.
saying. So you're acting without the commission, but we've entrusted you as a good faith representative of the
Correct.
intention of the commission.
Correct.
That's what the designee
Right.
entitlement.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to understand if maybe it's a moot point. I thought we were limiting ourselves. It sounded to me like the language was making it so that it's only like, okay, at the beginning we have to vote on the designee is it, and if the designee can't make it, then we have a problem. Whereas the way I thought I was trying to interpret it meant that, okay, we have multiple options and whichever one is most convenient to
Right,
say, hey, this is no big deal, or hey, this is absolutely going to need to go through the whole process when it's an easy decision and doesn't require a meeting.
Right, and so I mean, like, you could, because it can be the commission or its designee, you could, the first meeting you passed this being approved, the commission can say, we're gonna make a vote that Jamie Webb is the designee and Jamie can make only positive determinations of historical city. Any negative determination would need to go to the commission.
That sounds,
Or, you know, like, any, or
Positive meaning it can be demolished because it's.
No.
the other way around. So anytime that, you know,
It's
that's
found to be
that's found to be,
historically
if it's found to be historically significant, like,
Right.
you know, I look at it and go, yeah, that's from the 1840s, like, I think that should have like
Right.
a,
Right.
you know, but like, I'm like, okay, this ranch house from the 1950s, it's old enough, but I don't think it's historically significant, but like, I wasn't granted that power by the commission to say, no, it's not historically significant.
See, that's the question. And again, it's not like I don't trust you, but when we're
But
talking
I think
about
that's, I don't
positions,
think
not
we don't
people.
have, I don't think we have to put that in the ordinance. I think that's like, when the commission votes to like, to make the designee, the commission will also vote to say,
You can only
like,
positive.
okay, we're gonna say Jamie's the designee for the next 3 demolition delays applications that come in, or Mike's the, the designees are a subset of the commission. It's gonna be, something that doesn't trip open meeting law, but it could be like 2 members of the commission can meet and discuss these things and make a determination on behalf of the committee or something, just to like get that moving without having to have a special meeting, even without violating the law. I mean, that's how I conceptualized it, but maybe we do need this all in the ordinance, because that's the,
I like the idea of, basically, you can only make positive determinations. So like, yeah, we have to look at this further.
Right, because worst
Because if you
case
say,
scenario, then
because you can get somebody that's on the commission that
right, or that's in the
working
back
for
pocket of
somebody
the
else.
developer, exactly,
Exactly.
anything like that. So if it's only a
So, yeah,
positive,
I can take care of that. No, that's fine. We don't need to.
worst case scenario, we were protecting it when we didn't need to, which is the lesser of the two. So that would resolve that concern. I still was a little unclear because I thought we were looking for just extra flexibility in when it's one of those easy determinations of having any one of us quickly move it to the next square by saying, yeah, that's an obvious yes or no. But it sounds like it's a little more nuanced, and I don't have any problem supporting.
Again, those are tough because,
Right.
somebody might look at it and go, yeah, that's nothing. Well, doesn't
I think,
go
yeah, the
along.
no's should probably come from
But if you make a determination within 30 days, and even if it comes to a meeting, that gives us the time to get to the next meeting, right? Basically. Say if we had a meeting tonight and something comes tomorrow, and then the next meeting is 30, yeah, it basically gives you that time. If put it this way, probably make more sense. If somebody came to see the building inspector on Monday and wants a demolition delay, building inspector didn't do anything until, he didn't think of even sending it to us until Thursday. We already met on Wednesday.
Right.
Now,
Now it's
our
a
next
month.
meeting would be over a month. So if you said on Thursday, you said, yeah, I can act on behalf of the historic commission and we'll have to look at that. And now it starts the clock, so you got 29 days to get to the next meeting. 3 Mondays. You have the time to get there, right? Is that basically the kind of the purpose of it? Besides short circuiting some of the.
yeah, and then if it's that no, I'll just keep coming back to the ranch house for the plans from 1950 list, and they would be waiting until the whole commission committee to say, no, it's not historically significant.
Which would only be a week more than 30 days anyways. I think, if you
Yeah, but
said-
I mean,
if you
I
made a
just,
determination, yes, we'll have to look at it. You make the determination right away.
but the determination is yes, it's historically significant, or no, it's not historically significant. Yes, we
Right,
need
right,
to
right.
look, yes, we need to look at it further.
Well,
But
if you,
but there's a difference between historically significant and preferentially preserved. Because we could say, well, yeah, it's, you know, it's definitely fits the criteria of the first four, but it, you know, there's no sense in saving it, whatever.
That's true, that sometimes happens.
Because, like you said, the ranch house, that technically is 50 years old. So right away, basically you'd have to say yes. So we would have to come into the next meeting and go, well, does this need to be?
Which is the reason why I had thought that having a more flexible designee would mean that then we could also get to the no's more quickly. But then we have to have some sort of way that we've determined essentially who's part of the group enough that they can speak for us.
We just, I think what we,
So the only way that an initial determination is negative is if it's less than 50 years of age, or it's not on Medicare, or it's not a National Register building. But really, it's just if it's older than 50 years of age, that's like that's the lowest.
we would have to actually at least look further into it, right? We don't have to have a hearing.
Within a certain amount of time, I think you have to, so say on
Well,
that
if we said
Thursday,
No,
they
so if
contact.
that initial determination is positive, the commission needs to hold a public hearing. If the determination is negative, then you can go ahead and demolish.
What do you?
I think if on a Wednesday, we got a meeting and on Thursday he gets the permit and he immediately refers it to the designee or to the chairman, and they determine that we have to have a meeting about it, we can call a special meeting. And then within that special meeting, so that you fall within the time frame, you have to then call a public hearing.
I hate special meetings. It's
Well,
it's
we
you know
don't
I mean
hate
just
special
just like
meetings.
realistically, the number of times we've tried like when we try to have a meeting, and then so we're supposed to meet the second Wednesday of the month. We're now meeting what's this third, but like it usually takes. What I found is it usually takes about a week to get a response back from everybody as to when their availability is for the special meeting. And then you have to have the notice of the meeting. You know, it's not impossible, but just from the way that the city government moves slowly, it's gonna take 2 weeks to get a special meeting together. So if the meeting is already scheduled for anytime in the next 3 weeks.
One thing I saw other commissions were doing, I don't know exactly where I saw it, but it's up here right now, maybe somewhere else. But what they did, remember we talked about scheduling the year out. They put out a schedule to say that demolition delays have to be in by like the week before the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll look at it at that meeting. So anything that falls after that meeting will go to the next meeting automatically. So maybe instead of making it, we're worried about, just make sure everything comes to a meeting.
Yeah, because that really, the onus should be on them, not on us. We don't wanna get in the business of having to like gather
Deal with their schedule.
and do special stuff just because they
So-
did it the day
So
after our meeting.
would it be? I guess the reason my understanding of why we have that initial determination is to not require every demolition in the city to have to go through a public hearing.
Right.
Well, no, they don't have
You
to,
would,
not
but
everyone.
each one should at least be determined
Whether it needs to or not.
by the commission.
So when
You know what I'm saying?
when someone
So,
who lives in the plains wants to build an addition and is going to knock the back wall of their
how long do you think,
they want to do a demolition. They want to build an addition to their house. They want to knock down the back wall of the house. So now we have a partial demolition of the structure that's older than 50 years old.
Mhm.
And they've come to, their contractor has applied for the dumpster, they paid their contractor, they paid their architects, they paid everything, their contractor comes to the building department, building commissioner says, okay, oh, this has to go before the historical commission, your building's 54 years old.
Yeah, as long as it's not on the historic register, that shouldn't matter.
Well, but we say,
Right, I mean, yeah.
what we say is the initial determination shall be positive if the structure meets any of the above definitions, which is age. So any building older than 50. So it's clear that it's historically significant when it's on the National Register or State Register or inventory, or where we know that it was like some famous person, architect, event, whatever, associated with that. But the more complicated one are these run-of-the-mill structures that don't have any, we don't know anything about them, they're not inventory, they're not in the state register, they're the correct age to be. And so.
Okay, so you're talking about like a renovation, they're gonna knock down how much of this?
Well,
That doesn't matter, because we said
Well, it does, I mean, because you could save more than 50%.
we say in whole or in part, any demolition in whole or in part, so.
Right. I understand what you're saying, but I think one of the other cities or towns was 50%.
I was gonna say, because we could add language that makes it more clear that in the case of just knocking down the back wall of a building, that its only condition is that it's over 50 years old, that we would probably be able to have language that meant that didn't have to come up for review.
So what if it's the front facade of,
That's in the language. The facade, that's exactly what I would have proposed, is a certain percentage more of renovation, the facade, any of the other things that are already on there. I mean, otherwise, it looks like right now what seems unappealing is I don't want to have to choose between either reviewing every dumb little thing that comes along that we all know immediately isn't applicable to this and is a waste of everyone's time, versus letting somebody just get away with taking down the facade of one of the most significant Pine Street buildings or something because it simply slid through the language. There's got to be some way for us to come up with language that covers our bases and accomplishes our goal, right?
right. That's exactly what we're trying to thread the needle on, and
Right.
It's not the easiest thing to do.
And this is why we're, still.
Well, come on, Jamie. Well, just write it down. Whatever it is, write it down. You said we can do it, so just put it on the paper there.
I mean, so it's like.
I don't know a good way,
I mean, the idea of
It sounds like we need to work the language a lot harder
well,
if we want to.
it sounds like to me the initial determination is supposed to be a way to very quickly thread the needle in the way you're talking about. The sticking point right now is that for most of the city, even our newer structures are older than 50 years.
Right.
And so
could we add a layer to this?
sure, we can also change the 50 years.
That's what I'm saying.
We could change the 50
Well,
years
what
to
I'm saying
75
is,
or 100.
okay, if anything's at 50 years, it should probably be taken, or fits any of these four, should go to the commission for a determination whether a public hearing is necessary.
Certainly in the case of total demolition, because that's a place I didn't realize we were parsing either. So far, everything in this meeting, I thought we were talking about total demolition. But if renovation is added to the mix, partial demolition, then I think we're going to need to suss
I
out.
often get these reviews from, there's like a building that's 50 years or older, but it's the renovation is entirely interior.
Right.
And so for those ones, we're just like, no, it's not historically significant. We're not dealing with the interiors. We're only
It's really big.
But that's not always true because there are going to be interior renovations that of a historically intact building that the commission would want.
We'll have a lot of control over that.
I mean, if it's,
You know,
Well, there's a few things, I
I
mean,
mean, if it's already, yeah, if it's on the national register.
there's
then-
which is where I would think part of the goal of our inventory is to have some sort of check marked things that we know, whatever happens to them, they're so significant. Old Town Hall, you know, doesn't matter, interior only, exterior, doesn't matter. Whatever happens to Old Town Hall,
We're gonna do a whole bunch of work on the
Right.
inside of that.
so
right, and that has a historic preservation restriction, and all that goes through.
make it another significant building with one of our, you know, one of the founders of the town's homes. So if we're saying that building is so significant in whole that even partial demolition or even an interior only change we would want to have some discussion about, then we could earmark those, and I would even suggest that at that point we'd probably be crafting a letter to let those owners know that, you know,
And most of those structures have been inventoried.
right.
I mean, that's the point of the inventory structures, is that even if the inventory forms are just like, this is an important structure and that's all it says, it's enough that some historical
It'll
commission
raise a flag.
has already figured that. And we have, I don't know, 1,200 items on the historic structure list, and we have 6,000 structures in the city. So, you know, the large majority of the like things that we'd like to see are going to have a positive determination just by virtue of the fact that they've been inventoried. It's these edge cases that we're going to come on. So, and we can have like different cutoffs to make these. Like the building commissioner says, anything over 50 years has to go to the historical commission, and maybe the historical commission can make that initial determination that finds that, like, if it's just the age of the building, that there has to be something unique about that building in order to make it historically significant, to warrant going to a public hearing for demolition. But I don't know what, you know, you just put something unique.
Yeah, well, that, you know, that's where these issues come up. Just thinking about the renovation of something, again, if they have to go for permit, I mean, they can't do anything until the permit's granted anyways, right? I mean, if they're made aware of the timelines, I mean, we should be, you know, and if, even if it's piddly stuff that takes us 5 minutes to, okay, I can find, I don't know, it's either that or we have like, designee, maybe one other person sits down and reviews applications every week or every other week and makes those determinations, yeah, we want to look closer at this, or we don't care, sign off on it. Is that something like maybe a subcommittee type meeting?
Do you know how many building permits and things come?
I can propose another idea.
How many demolitions?
Building, yeah, demolition.
Because everything has some demolition aspects to it.
Yeah, you know, we're talking 50%, basically, or raise the roof.
I mean, there's no language in here, and
Right.
and about the percentage. I'm trying to figure out like.
I'm trying to figure out what would be our best way for us to catch mostly everything without, and then we could put the language in there, but okay, this is how we're gonna catch it.
Let me throw something totally different out, and I don't know if it's a solution or not, but it's a different way of approaching the problem. So let's say that the means of determining whether the question gets a yes or no is that it defaults to no, it's not historically significant, if the members of the commission have, I don't know the exact language here, but we've checked off that we've checked. In other words, it can't be that nobody heard, right? You can't say, oh, well, nobody protested. But that if we checked off that none of us protested, then it defaults to, no, it's not historically significant. If even only one member,
But
raises the flag, then it would default, and again, this is assuming that would become the process by which we're making this determination. But that would be a different way of getting quickly to know if there was nothing to cause us to say, whoa, wait a minute, right? Because
were we doing that outside of the meeting?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say is,
But then we're making a determination, the commission is making a determination outside of the meeting, which violates the open meeting law.
this is what I'm saying, is that I'm pretty sure there must be a way that if what the language of the ordinance is that without a reason to say no, for lack of a better term here, right? Without a reason to say no, we're happy for things to move quickly to yes. And the only thing that has to happen is that, in other words, I'm thinking, isn't it probably possible that the determination is a default, so a meeting isn't necessary. You're not violating open meetings law because you're not having a meeting, because no one wanted to have a meeting to say, yes, it's fine to do that. You see what I mean? So avoiding that precise problem by making it not necessary.
How do we know that?
Know which, that we all say no, because if, I'm guessing that if everybody said, oh yeah, I understand what building is in question, you don't know anything from memory, nothing in macros, none of this, everybody has said, I mean, I don't know, it's just me trying to throw out another way of approaching the problem so that we could get quickly to the objectives that we have instead of get lost in the bureaucracy of language.
We've had that come up when the PV, whatever it is, comes to us with some change on a building that we know is not historically significant because they're looking for federal money. And we just immediately rubber stamp it saying, yes, this isn't in our inventory, and send
The section 6 reviews.
whatever, yeah.
Again, I'm only hearing that what we're running into are conflicting desires to not bog down the process, but not rubber stamp abuse of demolition. So there's got to be some way to do that, and
Maybe go back to the designee thing where, somebody basically has to look at whatever is potentially demolition. I mean, you're saying that there's how many there are, but how many have we ever seen before? We don't typically see the partial ones anyway. At all.
We don't, but occasionally, like,
I don't think it's bad to see one.
I mean, I think that there are, if the ordinance as it's currently written, like the current ordinance were strictly followed,
You see one.
we would do nothing other than talk about whether or not, there'd be, if they get 3 or 4 applications a day for different projects, so the first would be 20 projects, and we'd have to meet weekly in order to just keep up with the initial
Yeah,
determination.
but over the years, we've never had 20 projects coming in for a demo delay. It's been like,
But I don't think that the ordinance has been followed to the letter that it's written. And so if that's fine, because the commission's actually fine with this, then I think we should rewrite the ordinance to make it the process that we want, not the, I think that it's very easy to overwhelm this commission with meaningless work with a very simple misunderstanding of how much is coming into the building department. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's not.
how many demolitions are coming in? I think
Most of them are not total, most of them are partial demolitions, but just about every building permit I've ever seen has a checkbox that says will there be some demolition? Yes. You know, even just taking down an interior wall.
Yeah, but then we aren't part of that.
But the ordinance doesn't say,
So what we need to do is add language that says things like either more than 40% demolition or significant changes to the character, structure, or historical facade. I mean, there's gotta be a way to put into words what it is that determines
Well,
the difference
right.
between a waste of time, you're taking down a bathroom door, we do not need to have a meeting, versus we don't want you taking down the columns on the front of the
so
building
maybe it's
that make
only
the character.
any exterior demolition in
Well, it
or
is
part.
exterior unless it's on the National Register.
What's that?
It is only exterior demolition. We aren't usually involved in interior demolition.
This ordinance doesn't specify.
So we need to
Is
either
this-
put in words that we're only
This is-
referring
This
to
is
the
the
exterior.
this is the current ordinance.
That's what the problem is that it doesn't say that, I guess. But to me, that's okay, so.
No, but that's fine, if we're not concerned,
So, okay, so this doesn't even say, in whole or in part. It just
no, but
says
it does say,
definition.
but under the definition of what a significant building is, it says significant building or some demolition, any act of pulling down, destroying, moving, or raising a building or any portion thereof.
So
And so what I did is I took,
So you took
rather
that and moved it
rather
up here.
than leaving the definitions strictly on the definitions page, I tried to incorporate a little bit of the definitions into the text of the document
it's great.
to make it clear, like in whole or in part,
Right.
so
But
that way
maybe
it's,
we need to
so
say,
that way it doesn't require the building commissioner about demolition. How are they defining demolition? It just says demolition in whole or in part.
so in part needs to be clarified, more specific language to avoid you're taking down 1/10 of 1% of something that was not historically significant.
Yeah.
That
I-
doesn't
I-
qualify.
I don't, personally, I think that we should try to find a way other than using percentages, because
Sure.
otherwise we're going to get building commissioner like I say, okay, how much square feet
Right.
is the exterior of the building? Okay, so we're just punching a small hole for a skylight in the roof, and like that's only 1%, so that doesn't trigger it. But meanwhile, it's on the front facade, and it looks really bad because it's a slate roof now with a skylight, and
It's a total roof, 2 exterior walls. It's, if you take the roof off, you know,
we could just say anything exterior, any exterior
over
changes.
50% of the exterior, you know.
Well,
I don't
As
see
soon
what
as
you
we get into percent, I that's gonna be,
Is this something, it sounds to me like this is something maybe we need to go away yet again, propose some additional language, and come back with ideas on how to specify this in a way that doesn't cause us, as you worried about, and I appreciate that, because I don't want to be in here all the time saying, no, the ranch doesn't qualify, no, we don't care about your bathroom door, no. I don't think anybody here is desiring to waste our time, so there's gotta be a way to put that in language.
Yep.
we could very easily, if just saying it's to any exterior demolition in whole or in part,
Yep.
then that would very easily.
Sure. What about our concerns about the interior of, let's say, one of the buildings
But
that's,
if it's, so maybe it's 50 years old, 50 years or older, if it's not on NACRIS and it's not inventory, or it's not in the National Register, so it's only for buildings that are, like, if, let's say, what's a building that's on the inventory? One of the buildings that we just inventoried.
My house.
What's your
Red's
house?
house?
So prior to being on the inventory, you could just demolish it. Because it's not inventory, someone would say, oh, it's on inventory, it's older than 50 years, but it's not as good as But now, it's inventory, so if you want to make an interior change, you want to take down that wall and you put in for your building permit that also has a demolition of the interior walls because you're changing the interior layout,
Which I did.
then that should come to the historical commission to say, yeah, that's not significant. or that's not important. Right?
How many places would we actually have any kind of teeth to say you can't do an interior demolition?
Only things are on the National Historic Register.
Not even.
Even then,
Not
probably
those-
not, because you can tear those down without.
We don't really have, that's the
We
whole issue.
don't
of the-
have any local historic district. We don't have any design review.
So, I mean, there's really not.
There's a Main Street Historic District.
We don't have a local historic district, we have national historic districts. The local historic districts are counterintuitively, the local historic districts are the ones that have all the design review and the ones that people are like, you can have any color you want as long as it's, colonial yellow, colonial blue, or colonial green.
What maybe, I mean, have we just beaten this to death to
We've
such a
beaten it
degree?
to death.
Why don't we move on to something else and
Yes.
come back? It just seems like we're just haggard about this at this point.
You know what, there probably made some progress and went all the way back.
I get the problem better. I mean, I did not, I was a little naive about,
It's tough because you don't want to miss things, but you
Yeah.
also don't want to be overbearing.
Right.
And be,
Right.
Yeah.
and I'm constantly reminded, I was one of the ones that made a fuss that when in the master plan, we polled people, everyone agreed we didn't want to be the kind of town that told you you can only use those 4 colors. We didn't want to be that kind of place.
I think I may change to purple in my house.
I'm all for purple houses.
Hope you know somebody on a historic commission.
Remember the house in, what was it, Sunderland, or, that was right near that diner?
Yeah.
And the guy couldn't get some sort of permit, and he ended up painting it was right near that, he painted the whole house purple with pink polka dots.
Yeah.
So, I will try, based off this conversation, to come up with something that's a little bit more, in keeping with the conversation for part 2. And I'm gonna, what I'm gonna work towards is trying to meld what I've heard tonight. So, I'll give it a try, and if anyone else has any suggestions on how that should work, email it to me.
Okay.
Can we continue with 3, or are we done and wanting to go home?
I think we need to look at whatever else is on the agenda.
Sure. Canal. We just have a meeting with something else, right?
Yeah, so, the canal update. So, we met last week, the consultant got their approval from the Mass Historic Commission to conduct their archaeological research. PVPC sent out postcard notices to every owner of property along the canal route from Connecticut to Easthampton, stating that the consultants would be wanting to come to property to do a visual inspection, photographic documentation of the canal, and if they had questions or to opt out, to let Shannon at PVPC know about that, because we cannot install on private property, we couldn't give the consultants permission to go on private property. We also couldn't wait to get affirmative, yes, it's okay from everybody, because that's when we get that. So we sort of said, let us know, you can opt out. And the assumption is that by May, we're giving them about 2 weeks to receive those postcards and apply, and then SWCA is going to start their actual documentation work starting at the beginning of May.
I think people will be pleased once they're.
Most people will be.
I think there was some opt-outs already.
There were a few opt-outs. Shannon said she got 10 replies, a couple opt-outs, some people just wanting more information, a couple people being very excited about this process, so, you know, we're interested in
Two
Kevin.
people will get off my lawn.
Yeah, of course. But we don't need everybody to, the SWCA, it'd be great if they could document the entire canal from start to finish, but not everybody, they don't need that to make that happen, as long as we have a significant percentage. They can also do some of the work for the neighboring properties, so like, if, you know,
Sure.
Mike's property, Mike says no, but Barbara says yes, and you're the abutting properties, like, from your property line, they can let the developer go, yep, it's still there, it wasn't filled in, you know, like, they're real need to be able to physically travel onto your property, so.
Just get somebody that's not associated with the engineering firm that's go through the water. I don't know where it is. I was really paying attention. Just kidding.
I'm really curious about 7.
What's,
Yeah, what is?
Oh, well, that, actually, I think we already touched on the question. It was whatever else that, when I did the agenda that, I didn't know it was gonna, this would have been one of them, it was more in depth. We got it under correspondence. Meeting schedule, are we all set with the canal? We're pretty good shape.
Yeah.
Okay, so number 7, I don't think there's anything else, I don't think. We'll worry about that. Get some more movement on that. Meetings, I got like, in the fall, I got like 2 more Wednesday nights that I have conflicts. I think one's December, one's September. Who knows? You know, a week before, change, maybe.
We could, I mean, if we,
Yeah,
are we,
let's see.
does the second Wednesday at 6:30 still work well for everyone? I mean,
It hasn't worked with me because I had like, you know,
Right.
for some reason, every second Wednesday there was something going on.
but generally going forward, that's still the case, or generally, that's, things are opening up here?
It's a good question. Like I said, I'll have the 2 more waterworks things on Wednesdays, and we also pick the second Wednesday.
But that's not until September, you said?
September and then December.
So,
Like I said, you know,
second-
even if we want to, move that meeting to like a Tuesday or Thursday
Yeah, so
or
why don't we
something.
stick
Right, but
second
like, I'm
Wednesday.
saying is like if we can,
Except for those 2.
right,
Yeah.
keep it as it is, but then the August meeting, we'll just, and the November meeting, we'll just decide when we're.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just fine.
And then the time which will occur from 6:30 p.m. Because I think the hard thing is for you
It's
to
just
get from-
close, but 6:30 is good. I generally make it. I might be a little late on that one.
But you want
Depending on
it
traffic.
to be early. You would
I
like
know,
to make it
earlier
hard.
would be worse.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Tracy,
And later it gets to be everybody's
Oh, wow.
going without dinner, and it's,
It's a little.
Enhanced,
Yes, but
alright, so then the next one would be
those,
May 11th.
yeah,
May 11th at 6:30.
I'll be back on the 8th.
hopefully.
Do we know, has anyone heard from Tracy or no?
Tracy said he couldn't make it tonight, personal issue.
And Nora, I assume
Nora
this
said-
is
she
spring
said-
vacation for them.
She said
Okay.
she was away or something.
Yeah, because this is spring break for
For
the
the schools.
schools. So I imagine
Well,
hopefully she got
I
away.
was not worried. Like I said, I kind of, reached out to you. You were gone.
It does happen occasionally.
So I was like, oh, I guess we'll have to work around this because the second thing is I just didn't have to get the agenda. Anyways, I mean, I don't mind not being here. It's just, didn't want to miss 2 in a row either. All right, so can we get a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn this meeting.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We didn't have to do a roll call.
That's true. In person, you don't have to do a roll
Barbara,
call.
Mr. Beverly, do you mind, stopping the voting?
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.